So I'm going to start with the 100 grit, and I'm going to levigate this for a little bit to show you how, and then we're going to have each one of you come over here briefly and just give it a try, and I can coach you a little bit on it. But this is just carborundum grit, a granular, very hard granular material. There's probably different kinds of sand that you could use to do this that would break down a little bit faster. The stone has to be moist when we do it. If you float too much water, you'll be wasting some of this. But what we're going to do, put some water on that. There's holes punched in the top of the lid. And I'm going to sprinkle a bit of that on there. Don't be so liberal that we waste it. And be careful when you set the levigator down on the stone that you don't drop it. We don't want to break the stones. You don't want to gouge it. Gouge the stone, it's going to take a while to bring it down so it's level. And it's pretty easy to keep the whole stone level with the stone this size. If you're using one of the really big stones, you're having to levigate or clean off and smooth a much larger surface. And the possibility of having some dips, low areas and high areas, increases because of the sheer size of the stone. And you've got to have it perfectly level. The reason for that is because the pressure on the press comes from the scraper bar there that is perfectly flat. So that perfectly flat scraper bar, if it goes over a recessed area, very slightly recessed, it won't print that area. It'll be a weak area. And so this stone has to be level, levigated, level. I'll show you later how to test it, but it's simply putting a heavy metal ruler vertically on top of it with thin pieces of paper, strips of paper, and you pull the paper out from under that ruler, or a heavier device works better, and you feel the resistance of the paper. And if it pulls easier on some parts of the stone, you've got too much thickness. So we're talking about a really critical level there. All right, so how do you do this? It takes a little bit of practice. Just a little bit more water there. A little bit of practice to get used to getting that thing to spin. And with a stone this size, what you're going to see me doing is basically just going around the perimeter, so I don't ever drop it off the stone, but so I'm always overlapping into the middle. This levigator is large enough that it's always overlapping, and so it's very difficult. It would be more difficult to have a low area, because that would only happen if I just sat right there in the middle and worked it for a while. Yeah, that's going to get lower. But by continually moving around the perimeter, overlapping onto the center, I should be leveling the whole stone at the same time. That's important. There are instructions in the textbook about what directions, what's the pattern you do when you're doing a larger stone. Crisscrossing, how many times and in what direction. So, again, you can get that thing started by putting your finger in it and giving it a twist. Now the question you would most likely have, I didn't put quite enough on initially, is how long do I do that with this particular dose of carborundum? I'm going to do it until there's a slurry. It's going to be a milky colored, gray milky colored slurry on the surface. It won't be watery looking, it'll be milky looking, kind of a cream. That is, what I'm doing is I'm peeling off microscopic particles of that stone. And when I get that slurry on there, it's time to clean it off completely and start with a new batch of the carborundum. What I'm recommending you do is 2 doses or 2 levigating sessions with the coarser grit, then 2 with the next finer, then probably 2 with this one. Now you could stop at any one of those and do a print. You're going to have a coarser surface if you stopped with this one, and I don't think you're going to want to do that. You wouldn't necessarily have to go all the way to the 220, but that does allow you to have some finer tonality. It's going to be a finer surface, a smoother surface. So I added a little bit more to that. Let me get it moving around a little bit. It's not a bad idea to practice with both hands. It's harder for me to do it with my left hand than my right, but after a while your arm gets tired. It is nice to be able to switch arms. Okay, let's just start right here. We're just going to go around the circle. Roll that right sleeve up. You're just going to do it for a little bit, so we're not going to have it splashing on you. So you're just going to take your finger and give it a shove and rotate it like that. Give it a try.
Oh my God.
There you go. Yeah, okay. It takes a little practice to get used to that motion. All right. Next up. Yeah, probably start right here and then give that a pull this way as you start rotating it. Yeah. Keep it level. Don't push the top of it. There you go. Don't let it run off the surface though. Okay, that's what you're going to do, but you'll practice it. You start off slow, and you're just rotating that handle and walking it around the stone. Next. Get the idea? It does help as you're learning this. I think you'll find it's going to help to hold a little bit lower on the handle, so you're not as likely to tip it like that. Come on over. You're left-handed? Well, then I would think you're probably going to want to go like this. You can go either direction, but give it a spin like that. Whether you go clockwise or counterclockwise is not important. It's going to be whichever way is more comfortable for you. Next. Right or left-handed? That's what you're going to do. Yeah, if it's in the middle, you're just pushing it around.
That's kind of a stupid
You
question.
have to get that wheel has to be rotating on the surface, so the handle has to be on the side.
All right, so just
Yep. Sweet. Now you'll notice as you're coming over here, you're going to see that this slurry on here is turning gray and getting milkier. Let's get a little more cream. Give it a spin to get her started. There you go. Next. Put your hand down a little bit on the handle. Don't push it, just rotate it. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. It doesn't take too long to, come on up, it doesn't take too long to figure it out, but the first time you do it, it's just a little, it feels a little awkward. It doesn't seem to want to do what you want it to do. Next. Whose stone is this?
I think it's mine.
Oh, okay. Oh, let's wait on you then. We're going to
Okay.
take you last, and we're going to leave you with it.
Okay.
Because you're going to finish it. All right, go. Good idea. I think some of you are picking it up just by watching. Hey, I think I'm getting the handle of this.
Okay.
A little faster now. That's the idea.
Okay.
Okay? Now, let me repeat. When you're doing your own stone, you cannot sit in one spot. In fact, I'm going to work this just a little bit and maybe take out some damage that might have been done with your practicing because you were over here in the middle a little bit more. And we want to make sure that this stone is levigated nicely all the way around. By the way, the slurry is getting a little bit thick, and so it's getting harder to turn it. That means it is time to lay this aside and wash it off with the sponge. Now it is pretty obvious that we've been concentrating on the middle in the process. I want you to come and look at this. We can see that this is cleaner and the drawing is still showing up out here. Can you see that? It's darker out here. We don't want that. That's happened because I've been letting you take turns practicing, and we haven't been going over the whole surface uniformly. So with this coarser grit, it'll be really important to make sure we go over the whole thing. Now, the other thing is when you go from a coarse grit to a finer grit, you want to get every bit of the first grit, the coarser grit, off the stone, off the sides of the stone, particularly on your final levigating session. You want to make sure you get it rinsed really well. What we discovered were some really fine little lines, scratches in the drawings once we etched the drawings. And I'm pretty confident those happened because the stone didn't get cleaned off and a little bit of grit was on there, leaving some lines in the very last step. Well, okay, so we're going to go back to the 100 again. Right now I wish I had some of the 50 just to make sure we're getting that outside perimeter taken down. So I'm going to go ahead and do this a little bit and make sure I'm working the outside. By the way, you want to make sure your stone is far enough this way that you don't hit your knuckles against the, I learned the hard way. You don't want to hit your knuckles on that. See me hanging out on the corners a little bit? I'm doing that to get those corners down. Right now, visually, I can see that those weren't levigated as much because of that leftover stuff. But once that stone looks clean, once the previous drawing is gone, you don't have any way to visually tell. Then you have to check it with the pieces of paper later on. Process. I'm going to rinse this off, and then where's my, yeah, you're going to come over here and take over.
Okay.
And we don't have to all stand around and watch you do it. We'll leave you alone, but I'll be around if you have questions. I'm going to have you, we're going to wash this, and you're going to start over as if this is your first time with this grit, because we want to make sure we've got that pretty level and it's more efficient to do it with the coarser grit. So you're going to bring this up to the slurry. Actually, get that slurry where it looks like you want it to look before I turn it over to you. Okay. Come over here and look, one at a time or two, just parade by here. I want you to get a feel for what we're looking at before we wipe it off. Yeah, yeah. This is a slurry now. It's a milky looking slurry. Okay? That's